Good evening and welcome to the regular planning board meeting for Monday, October 14th, 2024. It is 6 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order. I'm going to say real quick a shout out to my wife and my son tonight. It's our wedding anniversary, and Mr. Ramirez, she would like a steak dinner from you. Before we begin our meeting, there will be a general period of public comment tonight during oral communications. Persons speaking during the general public comment period may provide the planning board oral communication on any matter concerning city business. Members of the public may comment in person or by telephone during the public comment period. If you would like to participate in the public comment period by making an in-person comment, please present a completed speaker card to the planning staff. If you would like to participate in the public comment period by telephone, please call 818-238-3335. We will announce when the phone lines are open. Ms. Wick will lead us in our invocation, and I'll follow with our flag salute. If you'll please stand.
Well, your anniversary shout out was a hard act to follow. So this will be a very quick inspirational quote by Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Real change, enduring change happens one step at a time.
Please join me in saluting our flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, can we have the roll call?
Chair Rosati,
I'm here.
Vice Chair Wick,
Present.
Commissioner Bennett,
Here.
Commissioner Makatumian,
Present.
and Commissioner Safarian. Sorry, I don't know.
Safarian.
Safarian, sorry.
Great. And do we have any announcements from our staff?
No announcements?
No announcements. There are no hearing items on tonight's agenda. We will move on to reports to the commission. There are two reports on the agenda. Item number 1, now is the time and place for the planning board to consider a report on the proposed downtown parking management plan. Will the representative of the Community Development Department please introduce yourselves and summarize the matter?
Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Karen Pan, Transportation Services Manager in Community Development Department. I'm here with my colleague, Angelica Gonzalez, Parking Analyst, Nick Brandt, Senior Analyst, as well as David Krisky, our Assistant Community Development Director. Tonight, we are presenting to you the proposed parking management plan as part of downtown Burbank. October of last year, Council had directed us to look and to develop a parking management strategy for our downtown Burbank. Initially, back in 2019, we were looking at the Metrolink station, and due to COVID impacts, we had shifted our priorities based on occupancy level, and we shifted towards downtown Burbank. The reason for it is because you do see a high occupancy level on our on-streets in downtown. And so tonight, we're here to present to you those strategies and what we've been working on in the past year. When you're in downtown, you could see that we completed the San Fernando reconfiguration, making San Fernando a one-way street, and that was just completed in March of this year. And with this parking management plan, in terms of long-term vision, we wanted to make sure that we were consistent with our Burbank 2035 general plan, as well as our supplemental plans. So under Burbank 2035 general plan, under the mobility element, there's goal number 7 in regards to parking management, which states to implement parking management as a means to improve parking in Burbank, as well as our greenhouse gas reduction plan. That's also supplement to our general plan, where strategy T4 refers to implementing parking management principles that were adopted back in 2019 from Council. And these principles will be implemented as part of our Burbank Center Plan, which is known today as the Downtown Burbank Transit-Oriented Development Plan. And being consistent with our general plan is important, and most recently with state laws like SB 35, meant to streamline and reduce the cost of housing, has limited the ability for cities to require new development to provide private parking, resulting in higher usage of public parking, such as our downtown, that will increasingly require better management on the city's end. And so within our parking management strategies, we have 3 goals. The first one is to ensure and to help customers find reliable parking when they are in downtown, as well as increase access to those businesses. And the third is to reduce emissions and lessen traffic congestions by having drivers circling around the streets to find parking. And to give you an overview of what our city looks at in terms of demographics and the number of parking spaces we have, as part of the downtown, we have annual reports based on the property-based business improvement district. And last year's report shows that our current city population is about 103,000, and that's also from the census. And daytime population, we anticipate it to be double the amount of our city population during the day. In terms of annual visitors that we have going to downtown, according to last year's report, it's 4.1 million. And the number of businesses that we have is a little over 600 in that district. And number of hotel rooms is slightly over 1,000, and that's based on 4 hotels that are in downtown. And new housing units, we have 848 that are currently in construction. And in terms of parking spaces within that area, there is about 5,640 parking spaces. 3,000 is related to off-street. Off-street parking includes the structures and lots. And then for on-street, which is where you can park on the curb, that's approximately 2,000 in that space. The number of parking structures and lots that the city owns is 7 and 7. It's for a total of 14. And then this proposed parking management plan would impact 145 spaces, knowing that we are looking at only on-street parking spaces in terms of implementation. And we'll go over what that looks like. So today, the way we manage parking, we have limited tools. We have signage that we use that tell you how long you can park, and they vary between 60 minutes, 90 minutes, or a different time. And then we also manage parking with our parking permits. We have day use permit, so if you wanted to park there for the day, it would be $6. And then if you wanted to park in downtown, there's a monthly permit for $67. And while we have signage as well as parking permits, those are limited tools today, and there are shortfalls with that type of management. As you can see today, we still have low availability of on-street parking along those streets, as well as limited regulation, and there is no parking revenue that's being reinvested back into our downtown. And today there's more technology on how we can better manage parking. So in terms of the parking management strategies, staff is recommending that we manage on-street parking spaces, which is the curb parking spaces, based on price and availability, meaning that any person or any driver who would like to park along those streets would pay for a price at an hourly rate, and it would be prorated, and it would be based on occupancy level, and then we'll go over a little bit of how that looks like. But our goal is to have 80% occupancy level, meaning that every block we hope to have 1 to 2 parking spaces available based on these new strategies. And then within those strategies, we have an implementation plan. So within the strategies, we will go over our management options, as well as new infrastructure that someone would see, as well as how we would handle enforcement. The next slide shows you the proposed location of where we anticipate these parking management strategies to be implemented. So horizontally, you'll see San Fernando, as well as the other streets the other way, Magnolia, Orange Grove, Palm, Olive, and Angelino Avenue. And then I'll pass it along to Angelica Gonzalez, who will go over the next part.
Good evening. My name is Angelica Gonzalez, parking analyst. So here you see the average on-street occupancy. In March of this year, we hired a consultant to capture real-time data for parking occupancy levels in the downtown area. This snapshot shows the average on-street occupancy levels for a Thursday to capture a weekday and a Saturday to capture a weekend date. And maybe it's not so clear here, but in the handouts that you have, there's actually a red box in that exact proposed location that Karen just mentioned. And if you look at the San Fernando corridor, you can see that it's red, which basically means 86% or more. So it's fully occupied. So that is just basically solidifies that proposed location that we selected. Here, you're going to see the on-street turnover. And in that same red box, you're going to see the green color, which basically shows 1 hour to 2 hour turnover. Here, you're going to see our proposed regulations. As Karen mentioned, we have various parking restrictions in that downtown area. 90-minute, 1 hour, and 2 hour. We are looking to create a uniform parking restriction, and that limitation is going to be 2 hours. Currently, the restrictions are 7 days a week, including holidays, and so we are going to keep those same restrictions. Clearly, there's no paid parking, so what we are proposing is paid parking hours from 8 a.m. until 12 p.m., which means 16 hours per day. At the moment, we do random occupancy studies, as needed or when budgeted. We are proposing to do up to 6 parking studies throughout the year. On to proposed regulations. So currently, there's no paid parking on street at the moment. We are proposing to start the rate at $2, and this rate can be adjusted based on occupancy, and we would review this data on a quarterly basis. Clearly, there's no, parking citations, as there's no paid parking operation. So we are going to be introducing 2 new citations for that proposed zone. One is for not paying for parking, and then the second one would be for overstaying that 2-hour restriction. So underneath examples, we're showing you basically, if we're not at our goal of 80% occupancy, we're lower than that. At that point, we will lower that $2 mark. And then if we are, exceeding that 80%, we're going to raise it. We want to still capture that 80%. What we're trying to gain or goal again is to have that 1 to 2 space occupancy on every block. Our consultant also put together some of our sister and surrounding cities and their proposed rates and locations. So Burbank is highlighted in blue. You see we are, again, proposing $2, which fits right in the middle. So the lowest is $125, the highest $250. So we are right in that same mark for paid parking. Again, we are proposing 2 hours in that proposed paid parking area zone, 8 a.m. until 12 p.m. And of course, this is going to be every day, 7 days a week. With this operation, we are proposing to hire a paid parking operator. They're basically going to be managing the collections of the monies from the kiosks. Also, they're going to maintain their infrastructure. So if a kiosk is down or signage is down, it's missing, perhaps there's graffiti or stickers on it, they'll be maintaining that as well. They're also going to be managing our parking enforcement in that particular area, providing customer support to make sure that the consumer is able to properly and basically provide proper education. This is brand new, so people are going to one, not like change, and two, not know how to go about this paid parking. So there's always going to be somebody there to make sure they know how to use the kiosks and or use any of the mobile applications. They're also going to be assisting in outreach and education. Onto the infrastructure. So we intend to install solar-powered kiosks which accept coin and credit cards. And we're also going to be introducing mobile pay. So mobile pay, you have the option to download an app. You don't have to download it. You can use their website. You can actually text to pay, or you can call in and submit payment. This mobile app comes in handy for those who perhaps, just to give you a scenario, maybe somebody was thinking they were just going to stay an hour for lunch, and that time is actually exceeding. Maybe they need to add some time. Instead of the customer having to run out and go pay or put money in the kiosk, all they would have to do is, text to pay or do the mobile app and add some time, as long as it doesn't exceed that 2 hours. Also, we're going to have regulatory signage, make sure that people are aware that now there is paid parking for on-street operations. And then the last photo is a mock-up of, our paid parking. So when we select a mobile vendor, we'll be able to, brand it accordingly. And then we are going to be using the license plate as a credential. So no longer having to, look for a space number or whatnot. Now you're going to basically be entering your license plate. That's going to be your credential. So now it is permit by plates. And you would put that into either the kiosk or the mobile app, submit your payment, and then you're good to go. As soon as you confirm payment, your license plate then is active. So you can simply walk away. So with this effort, one of the most important things is to make sure that we have proper parking enforcement. Currently, the enforcement in Burbank is done via license plate recognition. So the vehicles are equipped to photograph the plates, and because of that, that's another reason why we're going with this method of the license plate as a credential. Let me go to the next slide. So any revenue that we will be getting, we intend to basically bring it back into restoring, some of our infrastructure. So up here you see unfunded needs. Our city hall and courthouse parking structure is in desperate need of improvements, and we are looking at over $5 million in improvements. In our Orange Grove structure, and again, these are all city-owned structures, we are looking at approximately $500,000 in improvements overall, and then the elevator alone is just another, $500,000. So what we intend to do is any revenues that we get, we want to basically put them back into our parking infrastructure. As far as next steps, we're just going to continue with outreach. We've already have presented to several boards and commissions, and then next month we are aiming to go to council and present this strategy. If all goes well, then we are looking at an implementation date of early 2025. That concludes my presentation. Please let us know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now open up the meeting to hear from any person who wishes to speak on this matter. Each person may address the planning board for a maximum time of 3 minutes. For members of the public who wish to comment in person, please present a completed speaker card to the planning division staff. If you wish to speak, for members of the public that wish to comment by telephone, please call 818-238-3335 to address the planning board. Callers will be placed in the queue until all in-person comments have been received. The phone lines are now open. Please bear with us as we get the first few callers through. For callers, please remember to lower the volume on your TV or your computer to take your phone off speaker when delivering your comment. Madam Clerk, we'll get to the phone in a minute. Let's go with Mr. Donahue.
Good evening, Commissioners. Chair Rosati, Vice Chair Wick. Thank you very much for your service. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you on this matter. I've been in the Transportation Commission when it's been deliberated and discussed. I was not planning to address this, but I noticed there was a little bit of a clarification issue that I may be in your reports, but I think just for the record, it would be important to point out. The unfunded need of $5 million and $500,000 million, I think that's, I think there is a number that staff has of actually what this is going to net. So if that could be at least read into the record, because I think it's a fraction of the staff's report of, hey, this is what we need. So that was it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone on our telephone?
No callers.
Let's just give it 1 minute. Okay, there being no further comments, I now declare the public comment period closed. Would the representative of the Community Development Department like to make any further comments?
Yes, I can answer the question that was presented, and thank you for the opportunity. In regards to implementation and how much this would cost, the cost revenue analysis, we're still working on that part since it involves multiple contracts. So we anticipate that there would be an expense for the parking operator on an annual basis to collect that revenue on behalf of the city, as well as provide that customer service and the education part of this. There's also an expense related to enforcement. And with this, we are proposing that there'll be 3 parking enforcement representatives to be part of this effort to enforce paid parking. And then there's also the fee that's related to the cost of the mobile application. And there's a one-time cost for the infrastructure. Overall, if we had a ballpark at this moment, it's about $1 million in revenue, and then the first year it's also $1 million, including the one-time costs. When we remove that one-time cost, it's about 25 to 30% of that $1 million. So then the annual reoccurring cost would be about $700,000 to $800,000 per year. And so that net revenue comes with what staff had presented regarding the parking management revenue policy of having a policy stating that any net revenue related to this would be in support of the infrastructure that's in need of improvements in downtown. Within that policy, it also includes and expands to other needs. If there are other needs outside of those parking structures and lots in support of the improvements of downtown in general, or other improvements if parking management is needed in other parts of the city. If it's like Magnolia or Media District, the policy would include that any net revenue would be able to support those areas as well.
Great, thank you. Does the board have any questions for staff? Yes. Bennett.
Let me start with, sorry, what you just said, because I just wanted to clarify. Are you saying that it's going to cost us $700,000 to get a revenue of $1 million?
We anticipate approximately 1 million from this effort of
Right.
collecting paid parking.
Yes.
And then the annual cost would be approximately 700 to 800,000.
Sorry, I think, yes, okay. So our margin is only like 20% on this, you're saying?
About 25 to 30%.
That seems very low for ongoing, like, it seems like a low margin and high cost for ongoing.
It's a low margin because we wanted to make sure that the fee that we are in comparison to other cities is reasonable, as well as the other costs that we have related to this. So in our scenario, for our city, that cost includes parking enforcement, which isn't the general part of another city. Usually that's just a separate cost, but in our case, we've included it. Part of it is also the transaction and convenience and the credit card fees. And within that cost, we've included that cost on behalf of the city. So as a consumer, if you're parking, you're not paying $2 plus a convenience fee or a credit card fee, that we've already assumed all of those costs
Sure.
in our in our rate. And some cities have it differently, where they might charge $2 plus a convenience fee. And so that's the reason for the margin. And then just one more thing
Sure.
is that that projection, and I should have clarified better, is that it only includes the revenue that's related to paid parking. And so it doesn't include the revenue from citations.
Okay.
So if it's hard for us to project what that citation revenue would be.
Sure.
And so that's just solely based on the paid parking portion.
Yeah, I'm sure that's its own landmine that we don't want to get into. Presumably, as you start charging for this parking, you will push people out of the core area to park in other places that are free. So do you then expect to expand this zone as that occurs?
It is a possibility, and so that's the whole reason why we added occupancy level studies to ensure that we are able to capture that information better today as we implement this. And we anticipate that happening, where we will see more people use parking structures and lots.
I was going to say, so I assume that the structures, which are already relatively full, are going to be even more full, which will then lead you to charge to use the structures in the future.
It is a possibility, and with our structures, we don't have the full data to confirm what the occupancy levels are in those structures. But as of today, there are approximately 6,000 parking spaces, whether they're off-street or on-street, and that's something that we would continue to monitor.
And then last thing, you mentioned that you were also looking at Magnolia Park, also a place of high parking usage in the city.
That was just a what-if scenario.
Oh. No, that seems like a great idea to me. It's absolutely an area of high usage. We should absolutely put parking meters there, but I just was wanting to ask. Very good. Thank you.
Thank
Great.
you.
Mr. Booker, do you have some?
Thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to ask, have there been any discussions to allow for residents who are going to be most impacted by these fees to have some sort of input on how this money gets reinvested in their community?
So, hi, my name is Nick Brandt, Administrative Analyst 2 with the Transportation Division. We've held a number of community meetings to discuss this. I will also say that we're going to be holding a few more. The next one is going to be at our Transportation Commission meeting. That will be next week, October 23rd at 5 p.m. in room 104 of CSB. We'll also be presenting to our City Council. If the public wants to have input on where those funds are reinvested, those are excellent arenas for, or excellent forums for those kinds of suggestions.
Great.
Well, I was more so wondering if there's opportunities to create like workshops around ideas that the community might have, if that's possible before this gets implemented or before it gets brought up to City Council.
I see. We have had had two community meetings. I don't think we touched on that specific idea. That being said, we are welcome to hearing ideas from the public on ways that those funds can be programmed in the future.
I have a bunch of questions. Do you have questions? Okay. A little concerned about a couple things. The mobile feature. Our seniors are already disenfranchised because of the electronic age. What if somebody has a flip phone?
Thank you for that question. We want to make sure that within the parking management strategies that this would be a simple process, a simple transaction, so it doesn't take away that customer service experience when you are in downtown. And we do acknowledge that there is sometimes a challenge for those that don't have mobile phones or don't want to even use a mobile application. And that's the reason why that part of the strategy is to have different outlets where they can pay for parking. So if there is, if their choice is not to use the mobile payment and not use that option, that's the reason why we've laid out so many kiosks to make sure that it's available to them. So it's physically there, as well as having a parking operator being visibly available to assist, especially during implementation. Signage will most likely have a phone number, so if you are struggling to pay for parking, you can always call that number to get assistance to pay for parking, and that would be available to the user.
To add on to that, as we'll have to check on this, but I'm 95% sure that the mobile payment provider that I think we're going to be going with will have the option to take payments via phone call.
It seems awful cumbersome to me, sir. Okay. And then have we talked about maybe free parking on Sundays? I know some cities do that. Have you looked into that?
We have. We went back and forth in terms of staff trying to figure out what are the best practices for us, as well as the operation itself on how much we can manage. And during our outreach throughout all of our community meetings or key stakeholder meetings, at those beginning stages, it was asking those key stakeholders what time frame works best, what time frame doesn't work best. And that conversation was also included, as well as our businesses and property owners. And we went to their meeting a couple of times to ask them those questions. Does it impact your business if we start a little bit later or a little bit earlier? And there wasn't much feedback on it. And based on looking at other cities and what our costs could potentially be, we landed on 8 a.m. to midnight for us. But there wasn't any direct feedback that we received regarding those timeframes.
And that was my next question. What have you heard from the businesses, the owners?
Within the businesses, besides those meetings that we had with them, we presented a survey where Streets Plus had assisted us in getting a survey out. It was just a quick 12 question for them to ask some basic questions about how they feel about the project. And we received 39 responses back, and it was a mixture. Most of the comments were related to food mobile application, where those drivers who are anticipating to getting an order were taking up the parking spaces or staying a little bit longer on those on-street parking spaces, and they would like to see the city address their concerns because they felt like they were taking up parking spaces that were really for the customers. And with that effort, there were some feedback that wasn't interested because they prefer it the way it is, but some of them were for it because they see value in it. And we also discussed that with the board on what that feedback looks like. And the board members, which includes those property owners and businesses such as the Burbank Town Center, or if they own other properties, they voted to support this project and to move forward with implementation, and they wrote a letter of support.
Okay. And then technically, what's driving this? like, our population hasn't changed that much from 10 years ago to now, right? And as far as I know, all the apartments that are being built in the housing and senior housing, they're all parked correctly. So what is actually driving this?
Thank you for your question. It's a little bit of the long-term goals to make sure that we're consistent with the Burbank 2035 general plan. It's mentioned in our mobility element to better manage parking for the convenience and improvement of parking, as well as other goals that we have identified in our specific plans, greenhouse gas reduction plans, to really address that long-term vision. But it's also state laws that we've been seeing as well,
State laws?
like SB 35, where sometimes those development projects don't require a parking space requirements.
Oh, so we're gearing up for that, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Potentially.
Good evening, members of the commission. David Kriske, Assistant Community Development Director, and Angelica, Karen, and Nick have done a great job answering the questions. But I wanted to roll back a little bit to the higher level. And Mr. Chair, you mentioned, what is the impetus for this, and what has changed? 2010 downtown has been, some growth, but somewhat static for a long time. And so what's driving this? And I think for folks that have come to downtown over the years, from a city standpoint, looking back through all records, we've been trying to tackle the problem of how to deal with parking in downtown for probably 30 years. We haven't really gotten it. And so this is our attempt to finally address how to make it easier to move in and around downtown. So downtown Burbank, as my staff have said, San Fernando, we have always struggled with having to try and use those spaces, make them available for use, but also not have them not available for, having congestion and having them not being able to be used because of the way they're currently managed. So we're hoping that this system will finally allow us to use those spaces. Somebody coming to downtown today, it's pretty much hopeless to try and find a space in downtown. It's all full. How can we improve the experience for the users so that when you're coming to downtown to park, those spaces are available for you? That's what's kind of different about our proposal than a typical paid parking management program is, we've talked about the revenue and where that may go and how does the kind of cost benefit revenue versus expenditure. What's I think different about our plan is, first and foremost, we're setting up a performance measure that states how will the spaces be available. So that's that 80% occupancy. We want to set all of our how we're doing this around coming to downtown always having 1 to 2 spaces available. So the primary goal is the performance and the customer experience. Secondary effects are, do we make money? If so, how can we direct that into our resources? And oh, by the way, we have some pretty significant underfunding of our parking infrastructure in downtown. So we think it is important that if we do make money off of this, and we think that we will, reinvesting that in our infrastructure in the place that we're charging it. So not just frittering it away into the general fund to be used throughout the city, but really keeping it tied to the neighborhood.
That was a question. So it's not going anywhere else. There's not going to be other dialogue that's going to be funded. So it's going to our infrastructure of our parking garages.
So we are proposing that revenue in and out for this plan remains in our, it's called Fund 310. It's our parking authority fund. So we have a parking authority set up that's been around since like 1971 for managing our parking assets primarily in downtown. There's a couple in Mag Park as well, 2 lots. And so we're proposing to keep that money sequestered to the parking infrastructure and the parking programs. And then if there's further revenue above and beyond, then we are recommending that we could potentially use extra revenue for other city services, but they remain in the neighborhoods that the revenue's been generated. So if downtown Burbank prices its parking, that revenue stays in downtown Burbank. If Magnolia Park, if we decide we want to try something in Magnolia Park and we have revenue there, that revenue stays in Magnolia Park. We think that's an important part of the financial side of this proposal.
Okay. And then what about the valet parking? Is that going to stay or go?
So the valet parking program, the Business Improvement District had a pilot about a year ago for public valet parking. It was, I think, a 6-month pilot. We didn't really get a great uptake on it, and so it was canceled. But the interesting thing about that, I think, is it was competing with free parking. So there was not a lot of impetus other than the convenience factor to use the valet because you could always try and find free parking. A lot about how we better manage and make parking available, especially what we might want to do off-street or what private entities may want to do off-street, can't happen because it's always competing with free parking at the curb. And so again, another facet of our proposal is we're starting with the streets. So we're thinking streets. If it's successful, then structures. But we have to start with the streets because, as you mentioned, as soon as you do that, you're going to push demand into the garages. And yes, there are certain garages that are impacted now and will probably get more impacted. But the good thing about downtown, the luxury we have is we do have a lot of spaces. It's just maybe not the most convenient spaces, but we think there will always be a free option. There will definitely be free option with this pilot or this first phase because there'll be the free garages. If this is successful, if this is something the community wants to expand, and we maybe start with the innermost garages, there's always the lot up by CSB. There's always the courthouse parking structure up on Angelino near 3rd Street. And so we think that, again, with price being kind of the driver of where people go, there will be free options. They'll just be a little bit further away.
And just input on the valet parking, just personally, I don't come to downtown very often because of my family dynamic, but when we had the valet, I was able to take my 95-year-old dad and the kid in the stroller and not have to worry about walking long distances from a parking garage. So when we had the valet parking, I utilized it. So it might be, I don't know if we advertised it very well, but I don't think I'm the only one in that family dynamic that would probably take advantage of that. But I think that should remain an option for people in my situation that would, be able to park closer with young ones or an older person and not have to walk as far, and they can take the car wherever they want.
Yes, and so even without the valet, with this plan, we will have an element of that convenience because, again, the goal will be 80% occupancy. So we want the spaces to be well used but available. So you will have the option in that circumstance to park on San Fernando and be close to where you're at, whereas today, there's really no prayer. You have to really be lucky.
But we all know that enforcement on this has to be quick and decisive, because if someone is breaking the rules for an hour or 30 minutes, it defeats all this. I mean, so how much increase in staff? You said 3, is that an increase in what we have?
Yes, 3.
And they're going to be dedicated just for this area?
Yes.
And they're going to be on foot, bike?
Yes, foot and bike. Yeah, I agree with you. That's also why the expenditure side of the equation that Karen mentioned is pretty high, because we believe that the enforcement, as you said, the enforcement needs to be pretty swift and pretty accurate. We also think that the price will enforce the behavior more than just pure enforcement on free parking. So that was a question that was asked in one of the community meetings: is what would be the option if we don't want paid parking? The answer is really aggressive enforcement and probably short time limits. If we wanted to do the same model, the same performance without pricing, that would probably be the alternative, but it leaves out a lot of convenience. I would like to park for 2 hours, and I'm willing to pay for that privilege, but if I do the free parking enforcement model, we may have to keep it at 20 minutes and have enforcement just being very aggressive. And so the price will reinforce, we think, the behavior, but we still need the enforcement on top of that, because there'll be a certain number of folks that will try to skirt it. And so then we need the enforcement, which is what we're recommending.
Okay. And then what's the real number on the unfunded liability and infrastructure?
So they're real high level.
I'm just talking parking garage, not City of Burbank.
Yeah, so we had the quote on the slide of about $5 million for the garages, and then elevator
total
costs.
garage or per garage?
That's for the 2 big garages that have major unfunded liability. So we have kind of 3 big garages in downtown. We've got 14 assets, but the big ones are the Orange Grove parking structure by Islands,
Right.
the City Hall parking structure, which is the one right out here, and then the courthouse parking structure, which is at 3rd and Angelino.
Yeah.
Orange Grove parking structure has a lot of unfunded kind of deferred maintenance. We are making some investment. We're proposing next year to do a kind of we call it patch putty and paint. It's going to be just some basic state of good repair work, but there's still elevator deficiencies there. And then just honestly, if you go park there, just the kind of the environment of that old garage is not great. It's not the welcome to Burbank message that I think we want. So even if we bring it up to kind of a basic level, there's still unmet need there. And then the parking structure here, it's just very old. It's from the 70s. It needs assessment and potential improvements for structural, and then just the systems and the kind of the age of it. So we think it's definitely high level, $5 million plus. Again, we're not going to meet that gap with 145 paid parking spaces, but I think the message we wanted to show is reinforces our thought that we need to redirect the revenue right with the parking infrastructure. We don't want to send it out and have it compete for other demands in the city. We've got a serious underfunding of our parking assets that has probably started from the 80s and 90s. I think that chicken has come home to roost in that way. And so if it's not revenue from parking management, it's competing with other infrastructure needs from Measure P, from the general fund, and we have other unfunded infrastructure needs that can use those dollars. So what a great way to potentially reinforce and improve the financial standing of our parking assets with this plan.
Okay. Yes.
I just wanted to clarify real fast, because I'm curious. You mentioned the island structure. So there's the above ground aerial kind of structure, and then there's the underground structure there as well. Are those the same structure for you?
It's two separate ones. They're very tied together.
Yeah, okay.
The above aerial one is city structure. We built it I think it opened in the early to mid 90s. And that's the older one.
Yes.
Then you go further in, and underneath the collection project, which is the big
Yes.
mixed-use housing project, they built a huge subterranean structure for the residents and for the commercial.
Yes.
But there's a pool of, I think, 500 plus public parking spaces.
Yes.
That adds to the supply of public spaces. So we're just talking about that above-ground city
Just
lot.
the aerial, okay.
That is much newer. It's maintained by that big development, although we maintained, yes, there's issues there too. And actually, the city shares in that maintenance. And
I was curious, yeah.
worried that we're also slowly deferring in that one too. And so I think if this is successful and we move to the structures, I think a early target should be the Orange Grove structure above ground by Islands, probably tied in with the private public-private partnership structure that's right next to it.
Gotcha.
That property owner has expressed an interest in him being part of the first structure case.
Okay.
But we need to start small.
Yes.
Burbank is starting at 0,
I understand.
which is good, but it's also it's a big change for this
Sure.
community, and we want to start small as a proof of concept before we move forward with potentially bigger implementation.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Great. Any more questions for staff? Ms. Safarian? No, just press the button. There you go.
Hello. Hi. Thank you for your presentation. Everything is very well put together and easy to read, so I appreciate that. First question, I just wanted to know why First Street wasn't considered, like in front of Flappers, where you access the AMC area from down there?
So First Street, most of First Street has no parking.
Yeah,
However, there is a small amount of parking in front of Flappers, as you mentioned. That parking actually used to never be there. Then it came back around 2010, 2012. But it will be actually removed again as part of the First Street Raised Protected Bike Lane project, which is in final design right now. So those spaces actually will be going away probably in about 9 to 12 months.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that. And then also I wanted to know if there's any consideration for loading zones. As you said, there are a lot of DoorDash, Postmates. I see that a lot in downtown, and many people, including myself, utilize that service. So I wanted to know if there's a consideration for them to get them in and out in loading zone areas.
So yes, this will partially help that situation because of the turnover, and they're going to be subject to the same regulations as everybody else. There are Of course, the 2-hour parking, which the food delivery folks would be able to use. We also have implemented as part of the San Fernando reconfiguration some spots on San Fernando and just off of San Fernando. We call them flex spaces. They are loading zones until noon, and then they revert to 10-minute parking. We are hoping and seeing that some of the food delivery be directed to that, and that will be also priced. But also of the way that works and just the high demand for those services, we think it will only partially help. And we think that after this is implemented, and also the San Fernando, we've had like 6 to 9 months to evaluate. We think we may need to implement something further, potentially reserving an area maybe in the city hall parking structure for like a actually more formal waiting zone for them. It's hard because they want to be right up close to where the deliveries are happening, and this is slightly further away, but you're right, we have to do something because the demand is there, everyone uses it, but it's also flooding the use of just other folks trying to come to downtown. So that's another idea, not directly related to this, but we're nonetheless considering to potentially try.
Great, thank you.
Board Member Wick, and I have one more comment.
Okay.
Vice Chair.
No worries. So I have a couple questions that are just kind of honing in on everything that we've discussed. In terms of the parking rates, the $2 an hour, and you mentioned that could flex up, flex down. Is that going to be in terms of demand? So meaning if it's, a Friday night, will parking rates be higher than if it's a Monday morning type thing?
No, we are not planning on doing that. It will be $2 across the board, no matter the time.
Okay. And then, don't quote me on this, but has there been any thought to giving exemptions for electric vehicles? I think Santa Monica does that. I'm not sure.
We only have exceptions to those with ADA or veterans preference. We didn't put into consideration EV vehicles, but it's something for us to consider. So thank you for that.
Got it. And as far as back to the citations go, I know that the figure, the 20%, the 200,000 estimated, that does not include citations. But will the citations go back into the parking fund, or will they go into the general fund?
Our draft mentions that the parking citation revenue would also be part of the parking authority fund.
Okay.
Excuse me if I may. And that is just for the 2 new parking citations that we are introducing. Those enforcement officers will be able to cite all the rest of the California Vehicle Code and the Burbank Municipal Code, and those revenues would go into the general fund.
Got it. So that was my next question. Will they be able to enforce, for instance, a DoorDash driver double parks or something like that? So they'll be able to enforce that, but the parking revenue fund would not get the money for like a double parking. And then just one more question. Who will oversee this parking fund? Is it the IOB, or who would it be?
Parking authority fund is with Transportation Commission.
Okay.
And it's with transportation staff.
Okay.
In the Community Development Department.
Okay. I think that is all I have.
And then going back to the food delivery services, these guys are very aggressive. They can just kind of park anywhere. Has there been any thought of curb cutouts on Magnolia and Olive where they can pull in? It's not very far for them to walk down San Fernando, pick up what they need, and get back to their car, and kind of have a designated area. Like, I think City Hall might be too far, but maybe on Olive can service all those people between Orange Grove and Olive, and then Magnolia, from Magnolia to the middle of the block on San Fernando. Is there room for curb cutouts, and would it be worth doing? And same thing with rideshare too, because the rideshare can come in there and drop people off without stopping in the middle and blocking traffic.
So I don't think we need curb cutouts because we have enough outer lane and curb parking that we could just designate certain parts of the curb space for that. So we could look at Magnolia, like all that in front of the mall, or
No, on the other side.
so on the other side, no, we have a 7-foot sidewalk against the Ross and all the developments,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then we do have a lane that's too narrow to have parking, which is why it's not there.
Yeah, the other side of Magnolia is a little,
It's a little far.
it's a little dicey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, we thought they're all right in San Fernando, or right the immediate side streets leading off. We thought, well, at least the city hall structure, it's probably 150 feet from San Fernando, at least at Orange Grove. Yes, they have to spread out and then go down the block, but it's an area that we could sequester off. We own it. It doesn't. The other important thing, it doesn't eat into the 145 spaces. So we have a very small initial phase where we have to support revenue from those spaces. All this kind of one-time infrastructure that we need to kind of get set up. So I would be hard pressed to take some of those spaces out of kind of revenue service and make them free, which is why we thought maybe start with the lot.
So would this be like a hard enforcement saying you have to go to City Hall, you cannot pull up unless they pay?
They could pay.
Okay.
Yep.
But they're not going to pay.
It'll be hard. We also have we have a regulation that says that you can only park once per day per block. And it's hard with the 90-minute, it basically means you can park in downtown for 90 minutes, once per day per block. And then after that, you have to park somewhere else. It's hard to enforce right now,
Yeah.
because how do you know? But with the license plate, we could. Same thing with the 10 minutes, once per day per block. We have to work out how that's interpreted with the PMC, whether it's 10 minutes per day per block and then you're gone, or is it do you have the permission to park on the block up until the time limit, which is 2 hours, as long as you pay? That mechanics we're still working out. And we're also going to see, like you said, will 10-minute parkers pay? Will occasional 10-minute parkers pay? I think they will. But will the food delivery that's there all the time? We'll have to see. And it'll be back to the enforcement. So
Yeah, again-
unfortunately, I can't answer. We have to kind of, if we want to move forward with this, we have to kind of put it out there and then try it and then react. So
Yeah.
that will be one major part of it.
Okay. Great. Any other questions for staff regarding this issue? Ms. Wick, Board Member, Vice Chair Wick.
This may have been covered, so I apologize. There was a lot of information here. Is there any sort of review period after this is implemented, an annual review, quarterly?
Within our regulations, it says that we could do the occupancy study up to 6 times a year. And so most likely after implementation, we'll probably look at it either a monthly or a quarterly basis.
Okay, thank you.
So we're going to spend $1 million, so this is not going to go away. So I was thinking, is there a way of doing this without spending $1 million just to see how it's going to go? But that would be too difficult. So, yeah, it's not going to go away once you spend $1 million.
Chair, if
Sir.
I may, the other thing that's hopefully not lost on us is with some of the bills that you mentioned earlier, I think we mentioned SB 35, but then also AB 2097, is as more businesses start eliminating parking from their facilities, more demand is going to grow on city facilities that are very finite. So I think it's important, whether this is a pilot program, but just a bigger discussion about managing our resource, the parking, is going to be really important, both with the specific plan that's coming up, but then even in other areas where we're developing other specific plans, because we are seeing people now considering the possibility of reducing or eliminating their parking as a result of things like AB 2097 and SB 35. So it's unfortunate, but then the burden falls on the city and city facilities.
You know, I hear you and I agree with you, and I think you know very well my positions are on these bills. I think any developer that wants to build a quality project, who wants it to be a good project where people are going to come, they're going to park it right. Because if they don't, it's going to be inconvenient and people will just go elsewhere. I think we've seen some people that have built SB 35 projects that built, it enhances their project. And if their project is either to lease or to sell, it makes it, in my opinion, more valuable if you have it parked right. So my hope and my wish is that if someone's going to build one of those projects, especially downtown, it's already congested with some of the parking demands that they park it right. So time will tell. We'll see who's right. Any more questions for staff? Seeing none. This is a note and file, so it says, what is our pleasure? We're not going to vote on this, or do you want us to vote the note and file?
I think knowing general acknowledgement that this is a note and file and the feedback that you've provided already to our colleagues here in transportation is, I think you've met the obligation we were expecting, so thank you.
I think we beat it up pretty good.
There you go, thank you.
Mr. Krisky, did you have something? No, you were just happy that get beaten up? All right. We are moving on to item number 2, and I'm going to recuse myself. And last time I recused myself, I got a lot of comments about why I recused myself because I didn't really state why. And I'm going to recuse myself from this item because I was told that I'm currently living in that zone. So I will step out on this portion and join the audience and make comments for there if I have to.
And Chair, if I may, before you leave, just to clarify, your current residence is within 500 feet of the boundaries of the specific plan. Therefore, in an abundance of caution and requirement with the law, you're recusing yourself.
Yes, sir.
All righty.
Right, we'll give him a moment to go wherever he's going. Oh, God. All right. Well, moving on to item number 2, now is the time and place for the Planning Commission to consider a report on the administrative draft of the media-specific plan. Will the representative of the Community Development Department please introduce yourself and summarize the report for us?
Hi, good evening. May I have the presentation, please? So good evening, Vice Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Amanda Landry, Principal Planner with CDD Planning. I'm also the Project Manager for the Media District Specific Plan Update. The project is a joint effort between the City and the Southern California Association of Governments, or SCAG. And the MDSP project team also includes other city staff who are listed here. And I have with me tonight Senior Planner David Kim, who'll be giving part of the presentation later on. And then we also have a bevy of expert consultants helping with this project. So tonight we're presenting the first of 2 study sessions to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is the official advisory body to the City Council on land use policies, including possible adoptions of new or updated specific plans. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to give the Planning Commission an overview of the admin draft of the Media District Specific Plan. And staff is requesting from the Commission tonight feedback on the proposed goals, policies, and development standards within the document. And the Planning Commission will eventually review a final draft of the Media District Specific Plan and make a formal recommendation to the City Council. But before we proceed with the rest of the presentation, we just wanted to provide the Commission with a brief overview of what a specific plan is and how it functions if it's adopted, and outlining the role of the Commission in the future actions. So a specific plan is like a general plan, but for a smaller area of the city, and it establishes high-level goals and policies developed from the input of the Burbank community members, boards and commissions, other stakeholders, elected officials, and city staff. And it is also done in compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act, California planning law, and other city planning documents. So it provides objective design standards that are specifically targeted to that area to address the unique needs and goals of that area. And it contributes to the implementation of existing plans and policies, such as the city's general plan, again, and in particular its land use, housing elements, and mobility elements. Because the specific plan is a high-level document, it does not permit or propose specific projects, but rather establishes sort of a holistic vision of how projects could be built over time in that planning area and how those developments could be coordinated to achieve the community vision. The specific plan is not a static document. It doesn't exist in a vacuum, and it can be updated in the future to address evolving needs. So the Media District Specific Plan is one of 3 ongoing specific plan efforts in the city at this time. The other 2 are the Golden State Specific Plan, which is over by the airport, shaded in green on this map. And the other is the Downtown Transit-Oriented Development Specific Plan, which is shaded in blue in this map, light blue on this map. And the city, although it's not on here, will be soon commencing with the public outreach for a 4th specific plan, which is the Burbank Rancho Neighborhood Specific Plan, which is adjacent to the Media District. So the Media District is one of the city's most compact developed neighborhoods. It's on the southwestern edge of the city, adjacent to Toluca Lake, and is home to approximately 4.5% of Burbank's population. It's also the home to major businesses, including entertainment companies, a hospital, educational facilities, medical and recreational uses. One notable aspect of the Media District Specific Plan area is that, given its ideal location in the region, it's a major regional employment center with up to 69,000 jobs within its boundaries. However, there's a significant imbalance between the number of jobs in the Media District and the number of people that both live and work in the Media District. And there's approximately 0.5%, about 364 people that both live and work in the district. So most residents just leave the district for their work elsewhere. This jobs housing imbalance has contributed to a pretty significant traffic and commute issue. And those things can range from congestion, overcrowded parking, which we just heard about, neighborhood cut-throughs, and other vehicle-related impacts. As the district does have some rich transportation resources and opportunities, such as a proximity to bus lines, metro rail, freeway, and potential bus rapid transit stops, there is an opportunity at this time to address the imbalance through some coordinated planning efforts to align land use planning and mobility planning. So that kind of leads into why we're doing this effort right now. So the existing Media District Specific Plan was from 1991, so it's over 30 years old at this point. And with the assistance of SCAG, one of the main goals of the update effort is to seek and develop policies related to removing barriers to housing production, streamlining the permitting process, and then again, coordinating the transportation resources with land use development. The 1991 version of the specific plan was crafted mainly in response to rapid development in the late 1980s and early 90s related to the development of the studios. However, the guidelines and policies within that document, while they're consistent with the common planning practices at that time, we found that they don't qualify as objective development standards, which makes it very difficult to actually enforce them. Because it's largely unenforceable, this update is also an opportunity to develop more specific objective development standards that better reflect and represent the city's current vision and neighborhood design goals. And then the establishment of the objective design standards will help ensure that the city's vision and desire for neighborhood compatibility is maintained, even if projects are submitted under any of the state streamlined ministerial review processes, such as SB 35, AB 2011, and so forth. So right now, where we are in the project process, we presented the administrative draft to the council in early June, and since then we've been doing outreach with the community and other boards and commissions and groups. And so we're leading into the plan refinement phase, and we're coming to you with a recap of that feedback that we received to ask for the commission's feedback so that we can wrap it into a final draft of the Media District Specific Plan and come back to you for a final consideration before it goes to the City Council. So to summarize some of the public feedback that we've received, most people have been generally in support of the overall effort. And this includes most of the residents that we've talked to, property owners, developers. The Burbank Unified School District has been very supportive of the effort, and the City Council. We have heard quite a bit of feedback on how we can make the draft better so that it's, one, easier to read and understand, and that it better reflects the community vision. So here I've summarized a little bit of the main points that we've heard, and they generally relate to more direct acknowledgement of the lower scaled adjacent neighborhoods, such as the Burbank Toluca Lake neighborhood and the Rancho. Improving the plan organization and readability with a focus on moving some of the sort of qualitative text to the appendices and just keeping the meat of the plan in the primary chapters. Refinement of the objective development standards so that they better kind of emphasize contextual compatibility. And then more clearly identifying and depicting the specific mobility improvements that would be used in the plan rather than emphasizing the options that are already in the Complete Our Streets plan. And then we've also heard from several people, because the state has a lot of evolving regulations going on, and it's very confusing for the public to understand where we're working within the context of that. We've heard that the plan itself should more clearly identify the strategy for streamlining development of housing so that it's competitive with any of the existing state laws, such as AB 2011, SB 35, and all the various density bonus regulations. So people wanted to understand and see how it is competitive with those processes so that developers will use the plan rather than use those alternative options. So the specific plan contains 8 chapters followed by the appendices. The 8 chapters are currently available and they were provided to the commission, and some of the appendices are available on our website. They will all be provided with the final version of the plan. As we noted earlier, the next part of tonight's presentation on October 28th will cover chapters 6, 7, and 8, which focuses on mobility implementation of the plan. And tonight we'll be focusing on chapters 1 through 5. So chapter 1 is an executive summary of the plan. It's a pretty short chapter. It provides a guide on how to use the document from several different perspectives, from the perspective of a resident, from the perspective of a potential developer, and from the perspective of city staff. Chapter 2 is a formal introduction to the plan. So it describes the purpose of the plan and provides the overall vision for the media district and clarifies what the overall goals for the specific plan are. And that leads to what the goals are. So the goals of the plan effort is to emphasize contextual development. That means to make sure that new development coming in is more compatible and sensitive to other existing structures. To promote and encourage transit-oriented growth. And so this means encouraging the developments near where there are transit opportunities. And then again, streamline housing production, which means putting together a set of development standards that are clear enough for people to develop under, so that if it complies with all of the development standards, projects could potentially go straight into plan check than going through any other entitlement process. So chapter 3 of the plan just provides an overview of all the community engagement that was done as part of the plan effort. There were 8 rounds of outreach that were done. We've made several dozen presentations to various boards, commissions, bodies, groups. We did walking tours, presentations to students, and many, many one-on-one conversations with interested stakeholders. And again, the staff is intending on using and incorporating or addressing in some way all of that feedback that we received in the final draft. Chapter 4 is just kind of more clearly establishing the profile and characteristics for the media district specific plan. So it has a lot of sort of statistical data, demographic data, and it just describes sort of the transportation, housing, and economic characteristics of the plan area and the regional context that it's within. And then it also references all of the applicable and relevant city policies that the project team referred to throughout the process. So chapter 5, which is sort of the focus of tonight's conversation, goes into the development strategy for the media district. So the opportunity sites depicted here were identified through our conversations with the community and the study of the media district. And through this, we developed a general strategy that emphasizes future development in this identified areas, also known throughout the process as opportunity sites. And this is where we've heard from most people that it's most appropriate to develop, and this is where we've heard from developers that they actually want to develop here. This slide depicts the proposed density strategy for the district. So density is the number of residential units allowed per acre of land. And with the update, strategically, we're focusing on concentrating density in the areas that were identified as opportunity sites. So you'll see here that the most intense development for residential uses is in the dark purple, and that's at 87 dwelling units per acre. And then you can see that that density kind of gradually ramps down between 58 to 27 dwelling units per acre as it gets closer to the edges, which are generally adjacent to lower scale neighborhoods. So this slide depicts the proposed floor area ratio strategy, or FAR. So FAR is an objective development standard that represents the allowed square footage of non-residential development on a parcel. For example, if the FAR is 1.0, a 1-to-1 ratio of land square footage to building square footage is allowed. So similar to the density strategy, the properties with the highest FAR are concentrated in the areas that were identified as opportunity sites, and that FAR gradually ramps down between 2 to 1.1 as it gets to the edges of the district. And then following that very same strategy is the height strategy for the district. Consistent with that same strategy, the highest heights or the tallest heights are concentrated in the opportunity sites, and it gradually decreases as it gets towards the outer edges. The maximum height proposed is 205 feet, which is consistent with the existing regulations. And then it has 3 different tiers of 40, 50, and 85 feet. So taking in consideration the density, FAR, and height strategy, the proposed plan reflects an increase of approximately 4,330 dwelling units over what is currently possible. So what you see in this image here on the left is what is currently allowed under the existing land use regulations. And on the right is what would be allowed under the proposed regulations. So again, that represents an increase of 4,330 dwelling units and approximately 1.4 million square feet of non-residential. This slide depicts the zoning designations for the media district. So the media district contains a mix of different zones that allow different uses. And the administrative draft doesn't contemplate major changes to the zoning designations for the property. And these zoning designations are primarily going to be used to regulate the non-residential uses on parcels. And the density and FAR maps are going to, again, regulate the residential and commercial development potential. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, David Kim, who's our senior planner and has been helping with the media district specific plan update, and he'll go over some of the permitted land uses and massing strategies.
Thank you, Amanda. My name is David Kim, Senior Planner with the City of Burbank Planning Division. Good evening, Planning Commissioners, and to the public. In the next, if I have the presentation, thank you. So in the next several slides, we'll go over the topic of permitted land use and also the development standards that are found in the draft specific plans. So Chapter 5 of the draft specific plan contains also an updated comprehensive land use table with definitions specific for the media district area. And the purpose of the land use table is to provide a clear summary of all the land uses and also provide a note of whether they are permitted, not permitted, or they may require a special permit process in order to be approved or to operate in Burbank in specific zones. And as mentioned in the previous slide, the existing media district zones are proposed to generally remain the same. So the specific updates to the existing land use table will include adding new uses that captures generally the current changing business practices and proposals that the city has been receiving more recently as business inquiries have been received, and there are uses that are currently not listed in the use table for the media district, but they are proposed to be included to address comments that we may have received from the public and also stakeholders. There is also proposed certain changes to the permissibility of certain existing uses to provide opportunities where we can not only support the business community in the media district, but also be mindful of making sure that certain land uses are reviewed and do not impact neighborhoods. So overall, with the feedback that we have received so far for the media district's draft plan, the proposed updates will focus on creating a more neighborhood-serving, recreational, and mixed-use types of neighborhoods. In the next following few slides, I'll be going over a few design concepts that are being considered for the media district project. And as a general note, these standards are still in draft form and are continued to be refined as we continue to work with the public and also with the commission. So the existing media district specific plan generally has design regulations that give a framework of what the community wants to see in the district for new development. And the objective standards are what builds upon this framework and give specific development requirements that the project must provide. So crafting these objective development standards will guide new developments in the media district area to reflect the design goals that the plan wants to see and is consistent with the three overarching goals of not only providing contextual development, transit-oriented growth, and also streamlining the housing production. So with this in mind, the objective standards that are proposed will support this concept that we are building neighborhoods and not just buildings in the media district. And this means that new development must be aware of the context of its surrounding uses and that it would protect the character of the existing residential neighborhood, and it will create an active public realm experience. The plan currently proposes a concept called building frontage strategy that recognizes the surrounding context of the media district with an aim to build upon and enhance the neighborhood. The purpose of this strategy is to encourage more active and also appropriate ground floor frontages that will better connect with the public realm, and providing more opportunities to create design options that still create a pedestrian-oriented interaction between developments and the public street. So the diagram on the presentation notes several street frontage areas as noted as Main Street A and B or neighborhood streets A and B. Throughout the public reach efforts for this project, staff heard from many residents that new development should be compatible with the character of the neighborhoods and contribute to more living urban form. As a response to that, the plan's urban strategy and design strategy and objective development standards will support the goal of contextual development by encouraging development that's towards the core of the district and away from the outer edges closest to the lower density residential neighborhood. Objective development standards will also address the bulk and height of buildings and incorporate more pedestrian-oriented design features and requirements that include usable shaded areas or open space, for example. These objective development standards also include strategic approach to how we would address massing of a building that incorporates not only upper story step backs for taller buildings, and that's the diagram on the left depicting that, and which addresses residents' feedbacks concerning loss of sunlight or view of privacy because of the taller buildings. And they also include massing break requirements, and that's the diagram on the right, as it enhances, as we include proposed massing break requirements that would enhance the pedestrian experience, but also soften the visual impact that these developments might have and contribute to a higher quality design. As staff has noted earlier, the frontages are an important opportunity for buildings to be designed better and connect with this public realm or the street. So the plan includes proposed objective standards that can help activate these streets and buildings in the community, whether it is through limits on blank walls or having more open spaces, areas and landscaping where it is appropriate. They are all standards that the staff is continuing to look at with the feedback that we receive. To further ensure that new buildings are positive contribute to the community, the objective standards are more intentional in addressing building frontages where there are portions of the buildings at the ground floor facing streets that are more strictly experienced by the public. So what you see on the screen are several ground level scenarios where there's activity on the street next to the buildings themselves. On the furthest left is the active frontage, and these are where there's more pedestrian activities along these building frontages and connectivity with the entrances to the building. And the middle diagram is more of a general frontage, and these are where there isn't really a frontage to that building, but there are still amenities that are along those frontages. And to the right is more of a general residential frontage, and these are more specifically for the residential units in their buildings. So these objective standards assure that the ground levels have the appropriate level of transparency and also avoid the blank wall look of a building, and also provides opportunities for amenities to be provided along these frontages. These are additionally 3 examples of other 3 different frontages that this specific plan is looking at. And they are including frontages that are next to parking structures, parking lots, and also studios. And so we're trying to see what development standards can be used, combination of landscaping, walls, or design features that could be appropriate in these scenarios. So the media district specific plans currently has parking standards for certain uses. And so the proposed updates to the media district specific plan also includes reviewing our current parking standards and looking how they can be updated to address comments, not only comments and concerns about the parking districts in the district area that we have been receiving from the community. Staff is aware also of recent state law that affects how we may require parking requirements for certain projects and new developments. And so this is one of the reasons why staff is looking at updating and looking at our parking standards to be able to address how parking concerns are addressed and knowing that these state laws are in effect. Through this project effort, staff is continuing to look at ways also to make it easier to understand what parking standards are required for different uses. And also find opportunities where new businesses may be to take advantage of these parking standards and may be able to move into an existing space where there already is a commercial use. So these parking standards will include objective standards for bicycle parking, for both residential and commercial developments. And these standards will also have to be consistent with the other adopted city plans, such as Complete Our Streets plans. I will now turn it back to Amanda for the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So Chapter 5 also includes some information about the concept of transfer of development rights. The existing media district specific plan already has regulations that allow for the transfer of development rights, but the proposal will clarify the process and sort of the parameters under which that can be utilized. And right now, we're currently proposing that people that want to sell their development rights can do that, but only to areas that are identified as receiving sites. And those receiving sites are concentrated in the core of the district and those areas that we identified as opportunity sites. And again, this is all in the attempt to kind of maintain context sensitivity to the edges, which are again those adjacent to the lower skilled residential neighborhoods. So the next steps for the project in general, just to recap, right, again, we're at the plan refinement phase, and that will lead into the consideration phase. So after we come to the commission for our next meeting on October 28th to discuss more mobility-related issues, we'll be going back to look at the plan, make revisions to the plan to address the comments that we've received, work on refining any development standards and policies, anything that we have heard. And then we'll come back to the Planning Commission for a formal recommendation. We're also going to be completing our environmental review after October 28th. The program environmental impact report is the environmental document for this project, and ongoing work is still being completed to get that available for a draft release. And if there are members of the public that have been watching and are interested, we have other resources available online for people to check out. The project website is www.burbankmediadistrictsp.com, and it has some fact sheets, some frequently asked questions, all of the plan documents, a translation widget, and contact information. So with that, I wanted to just give everyone our project team's contact information. Anyone's welcome to reach out to us, and we're happy to arrange meetings to have conversations about your questions or comments. And we'll be back again on October 28th with the mobility policies. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
All right, great. We will now open up the meeting to hear from any persons who wish to speak on this matter. Each person may address the Planning Commission for a maximum time of 3 minutes. For members of the public who wish to comment in person, please present a completed speaker card to Planning Division staff if you wish to speak. For members of the public that wish to comment by telephone, please call 818-238-3335 to address the Planning Commission. Callers will be placed in a queue until all person comments have been received. The phone lines are now open. Please bear with us as it may take a couple minutes for the first callers to get through the line. For callers, please remember to lower the volume on your TV or computer and take your phone off speaker when you deliver public comment. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers for tonight?
We have 3 speakers and 1 caller.
Great. All right, we'll do in person first. The first person is David Donahue.
Good evening, Commissioners. David Donahue, homeowner, business owner, and also the current president of Vision Burbank. One of the things, two things. One, as Vision Burbank representative, is the Complete Our Streets, a 278-page document that is going to be really impactful to our community. I'm sure you all are 100% aware of 278 pages, midterm, long-term, what it's going to do to Magnolia and other places, and how it's going to impact. What you heard from staff is about this, the media district plan is what it's going to do and how they're going to interact. One of the things is connection to the public realm. You noticed that you actually saw patios on the street. in the media district. I think it's a little bit interesting because there's no sort of safety buffer. And if you look at any sort of area that connects to where there's going to be high walk traffic, that safety is a concern. I think that's something that needs to be addressed, and I didn't see that it was, but I'm sure staff could do that very easily. The standards, and one of the things that I'm paying very close attention because I'm in the accessory dwelling world, construction world, are fees and incentives to builders. One of the things the staff has said many times, and I've heard this before, and I apologize for my quick tone of speaking, but I just want to get this out, is the fact that the city does have some tools to be able to incentivize builders to not go the SB 35 route, or using the other state mandated regulations that are going to say, if you do low-income housing, you don't have to have parking, which is going to be is going to exacerbate a currently existing problem that we have in the city. And I think that that's a concern that I think this body should be aware of, and also communicating that to staff. What are the incentives that we can give to builders to say, put that parking in, or whether it's going to be a reduction in your permit fees or your connection fees, working with BWP or working with any one of the other agencies. I think that would be important to be able to figure that out, because you're thinking about that now. You're thinking about what we can do to incentivize developers to add the parking. What can we do beyond that? Or there's limitations. The long-term issue and this is the part that I want to make public comment on, is that this is a very long-term issue. I think that there is a push by the state, by our legislature, and by certain members of our leadership that are saying, let's get rid of the parking and let's make multimodal transportation the way. I do not see that way forward without massive congestion. It's an unavoidable consequence of, I think, the path that we're on, unless we give some very serious consideration to how do we mitigate the fact that people will not give up their cars. Laura Friedman said, Assemblymember Friedman, said that she wants to get you and incentivize you to get out of your cars. There is a very large percentage of the population that will not do that, and I would ask this body to keep that in mind. Thank you very much for your service to the community.
Thank you. Good timing. All right, our next speaker is Mary O'Hare. And whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you all sitting on the Planning Commission. Thank you for your service. I've been on boards, and I know it can be a trial. I come from something called a little neighborhood, a very small neighborhood called Toluca Lake, Burbank. We are not LA Toluca Lake. We do not have outrageously expensive homes. There's a lot of very small homes, and also my neighborhood has a lot of mom and pop apartments. The reason why people live in my community is that oftentimes they work with the entertainment industry. Many of my neighbors now are without work. Some of them are hanging on, but they use their cars because they're actors, and I myself thought I was moving half a mile from my place of business. I wasn't. All of a sudden, my entertainment company went down to Culver City, and I could not then get on a bus, a metro, etc. We would like these plans to reflect and to really have very good, and we now with AI can get this, how people commute in and out of Burbank. The 69,000 is not the same number that the Burbank leader uses. And I know for a fact that the entertainment industry is now going through a really, not just the regular cycle. We have Warner Brothers going to build in Las Vegas. Their long term may be that they may not be here. I would like you really, as you look through this, two things. One is please look at my neighborhood, at anything, and you will see that part of my neighborhood is in the media district and part is not. This is very, very important. And while staff says we are supportive of the process, which is right, there are many, many things in this that will wreck my neighborhood. And I'm speaking for both the apartment dwellers and for single family. So I really want you, and I invite all of you, to take a walk in our neighborhood and see what this will mean. Staff has already admitted that if we streamline with certain parking, we will have a situation. Oh, this is terrible. You know what? May I make one comment? The one comment I want to make is this. Many people in Burbank now, with all of these things happening, really believe that, for instance, the Planning Commission should have a study session not of 30 minutes, but rather have people come in, you ask questions of staff, have people ask questions of staff. Take the time. These are going to be the most important specific plans, all three of them, for us. So let's start getting democracy, which means much more input. I can tell you about the input that happened. Many of it was just 1 hour.
Thank you.
Staff has been wonderful.
Thank you.
I will say, staff has been wonderful to me. You'll allow me to say this. But I will bet that you are confused by this plan, and guess what? We are too.
Thank you for your comments. All right. Our next speaker made a very long commute here, Christopher Rosati.
Thank you, Vice Chair and board members. My name is Christopher Rosati. I am the chair of the Planning Board. However, tonight, right here, right now, I am here as a member of the public. And it's interesting that Ms. O'Hare was talking about her neighborhood because my questions are specifically about that neighborhood. I want to know specifically Priscilla Lane on Priscilla's Coffee House on Riverside Drive, and all those businesses, including the old FedEx site. How tall can those buildings be? And I would like that answer not in feet, but in stories, because I'm concerned about that neighborhood. That's a really nice neighborhood that could be affected by those tall buildings, depending on what size they are. My same question regarding east of Pass Avenue. We always consider that area the village. I would like to know how tall those buildings could be. Are we going to deviate from that village? Because I believe in the past it was only 2 stories. And then lastly, my question is, these specific plans are going in place because they will provide protections. And I would like to know what specifically those protections will be if we don't do it versus doing it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And seeing no other public speaker in-person cards, we'll now move to phone.
Caller is live.
Hello.
Hello.
This is Charlie Carna with Unite Here Local 11, the Hospitality Workers Union. The Media District Specific Plan is an important opportunity to expand housing development for the decades to come, but the plan also expands commercial development, and we want to make sure that that is balanced. So we ask you to make 3 changes. Number 1, institute a development requirement for hotel uses in the plan area. Number 2, stronger transportation demand management to encourage transit use and mitigate vehicle miles travel. And 3, please reconsider the reduction in parking requirements for hotel uses from 1, which is currently 1 per room, and is proposed to be now just half the space per room. All these are available in a letter we sent to the Planning Department. The link you should have received via e-comment. A development agreement requirement will help hold hotel developers to a higher standard to ensure their proposed hotel development is only permitted After the city has adequately studied a project and determined it will not negatively impact the community, the environment, or the opportunity to development housing. Development agreements are an excellent tool that allow the city increased levels of discretion to ensure that development achieves the greatest possible level of community benefits in an enforceable agreement, and that negative impacts of hotels are mitigated. Development agreements are not new to hospitality projects in Burbank. For example, the Front Street Hotel and Housing Project in the Media District was developed and is currently under construction pursuant to a development agreement. Other cities have adopted development agreement requirements for hotel projects, including Buena Park and Glendale in their downtown specific plan, which was recently updated to require a development agreement for all new hotels to permit their use, require minimum standards, and memorialize additional amenities. This makes those conditions much more precise and enforceable. Santa Monica's downtown community plan also requires development agreements in certain sites, sort of akin to the opportunity sites considered in this plan. I encourage Burbank to follow these examples. Parking and TDM issues are included in our letter and are subjects that will also be discussed on the 28th. Just to say briefly, one reason why we do not believe that hotels should get their parking requirements reduced, which is, by the way, still in your hands, the state law did not mess with that, is that if you reduce the parking requirements, we're concerned that employees will not be able to access the parking at the hotels. They're often, unfortunately, not considered as much when developers are planning to build these properties. And so if they can't use transit, they'll end up parking in they'll end up parking not rather than on site. They might not be able to do. There's not enough parking in the neighborhoods, and which will take away parking from residents. And so please look at our letter. We have additional ideas on how to strengthen TDM, which will be a subject again on the meeting of the 28th. But we encourage you to institute a development agreement requirement for hotels and to not change the parking requirements. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Do we have any further callers on the line?
No, we don't.
All right. There being no further callers, I will now declare the public comment period closed. Would the representative of the Community Development Department like to make any comments?
Hi, yes.
Please say yes.
Yes,
Please say yes.
I can briefly respond. All of these comments are great, and we will address them as we keep moving forward, and I can briefly respond to some of them that asked questions tonight. The other ones will be taken into consideration as we continue to revise and draft the final plan. So we are looking at different sort of incentives to encourage builders to use the Media District Specific Plan regulations versus invoking SB 35 or AB 2011, which, as all of you know, are the state streamlined ministerial review processes, which give wide latitude for developers to build, and they are only charged with complying with the objective development standards that are on the books at the time of submittal. And I mentioned earlier in the presentation that the Media District Specific Plan regulations that exist today are widely drafted so that they are not objective development standards. So if people were going to submit an application, developers were going to submit an application under one of those review processes today in the Media District, there would be few of those that we could actually enforce. So they would be able to build without reflecting the community's vision. So one of the biggest efforts of this is to build, to ensure we have those objective development standards. And for the projects that comply with those and choose to use the development standards in the Media District Specific Plan, they will go again to a streamlined review process, straight to plan check. They won't have to go through the discretionary review that's typically associated with a conditional use permit or an administrative use permit or other things of similar processes. And that's a significant incentive to developers. And then there's also a whole host of new state laws that recently came online. One of them, which allows the deferment of the payment of fees for projects until issuance of a certificate of occupancy, which can be a significant incentive to developers because they'll be able to save that money, invest it in the project, and then pay later on. So that's something that will be reflected as well. We are trying to be more cognizant in the plan itself. As I mentioned earlier, we are aware that people want to understand a little bit better how we're protecting or being sensitive to the adjacent lower scaled neighborhoods. So we'll be making that a little bit more clear in the final draft. But briefly, some of the measures that we're using are, we are referring to the existing city standards for adjacent development to R1 neighborhoods that were recently adopted by the city council in those mixed use and non-residential only development standards in commercial zones. So we're being consistent with those recently adopted standards. In addition, we have like other standards about operations for mixed use that limit like some of the impacts that typically affect neighbors related to noise and smells and hours of operation and things of that nature, parking. So those are all standards that are included in the plan. And we've had 8 different rounds of community outreach where we have tried to have a forum where people can ask staff questions. We've had many different types of meetings and different formats to sort of capture the widest audience possible. And we continue to offer one-on-one meetings with any interested stakeholder. And we look forward to those, and those are actually very informative, and we get a lot of great comments out of those one-on-one meetings. We understand not everyone can come to a forum, an open forum, or is comfortable speaking out in an open forum. So we wanted to make sure there was lots of options available. And we have had those sort of large open forum meetings before. We had a question about how tall can businesses on certain parts of Riverside Drive be? And under the existing regulations, they allows up to generally 2 to 3 stories. The media district specific plan is contemplating on those particular areas 3 to 4 stories. So that's the existing and proposed. And that is, again, in part an effort to entice developers to use the city's development standards, which are more realistically based on the capability of developers to finance these projects and get a return on their investment, versus our existing regulations, which have proven to not be very attractive for developers. And then there were additional questions about the specific plan. What protections will there be versus not for adopting it versus not adopting it? And I touched upon that earlier in my responses, that most of the regulations in the current media district specific plan are unenforceable. They're not objective development standards. So there's very little protection for neighborhoods. But on the other hand, the proposed plan includes a whole host of objective development standards that are intended to ensure that context-sensitive design while also promoting transit-oriented growth and streamlined housing production. We got some comments, both written and emailed, from the unions about the hotels. We are looking into consistently across the 3 specific plans how to address hotels. Some of the provisions that are being requested are things that we might be contemplating under our parallel efforts to update our density bonus and inclusionary housing regulations. So we might be addressing some of what they've asked for in that, and we will continue to study what the other suggestions that they have made. And then we received a couple other emailed comments. One was opposing the development, had concerns similar to what was expressed tonight, just of making sure it's sensitive to lower scale neighborhoods and protecting those neighborhoods. And there was one letter that was in support of the project as well. So for tonight's meeting. And that's just for tonight's meeting. That's not all of the feedback we've ever received, but that's just the staff's brief response.
Vice Chair, if I may add too, I think the purpose for the meeting tonight, I know staff has mentioned it, wanted to make it clear, we're providing this information to you well in advance of any consideration of the final document. So the idea there is to give you an opportunity to look at it now, but to also become more familiar with the regulations and to look at these regulations in comparison to any updates that we'd be making to the documents as they continue to be refined and address the comments that you're hearing both tonight and ongoing. Instead of having us provide you with a 300-page document the Thursday before a Monday meeting. So if you look at it from that context, the idea is to have the discussion be kind of an initiation today with the commission, but to keep the ongoing discussion and dialogue with you all as we continue to develop the plan. So That's why I wanted to make it clear that it is a lot of information to go through, and the idea here is to give you an opportunity to hear feedback from the public, ask questions of staff, and us learn from your feedback and questions on where we can make some additional refinements as we continue to develop this. The document itself, as you saw from the next steps, is still being developed further with additional refinements. So we think this process of continuous dialogue with you and with the public will be continued. So I just wanted to make sure, no pressure to approve nothing tonight. But with that said, we're wanting to give you enough lead time before the final document comes forward for you to be able to see kind of the major components, because those will remain. But with that said, where the refinement or where things we need to look at a little bit closer. I know Ms. Landry mentioned the transfer of development rights. If you go to the current specific plan, which I believe is attachment B, there's about a paragraph reference to transfer of development rights and kind of open-ended. So the idea here is how can we use a tool like that, like TDRs, to potentially protect the edges where there is a connection point between existing well-established neighborhoods, single-family, multifamily, and maybe opportunities to transfer that right that currently exists in some of these properties to the core, further away from the residential. So that's just an example of the things when you look at incentives and concessions that we're considering. But just wanted to provide for anybody that's in the audience listening that there's no final decision being made tonight. It's really kind of the first step opportunity to have the discussion with you all, because this really is a very collaborative effort that we're wanting to undertake with the commission. And I will commend Amanda and one of the members of the public mentioned staff's availability to talk one-on-one with members of the public or in groups, and we will continue to do so. So yeah, I just wanted to put that out there as kind of our final comments from the staff.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you for clarifying that, because I think that that's very helpful to the public, just to know the process, to know that we are not making any decisions tonight. This will be another note and file, but I'm going to assume my fellow commission members have questions. So,
Madam Vice Chair, point of order, actually. I know we normally go like one person at a time. There's a great deal here to discuss. If I could suggest maybe we go section by section and have all of us ask questions about a given section so that we can sort of have a dialogue back and forth and with staff, and then move to the next section from there.
I thought about that. Is everybody prepared to do it in that format, or does everybody have questions that are kind of scattered?
Personally, my questions are focused around Chapter 5, and also tied in with like questions about our housing element.
Okay.
So I think that's kind of where I want to focus on, tying those two things. I'm not sure. When you say section by section, do you mean chapter by chapter?
Well, sure. I mean, like we have, 5.3 versus 5.4. I didn't want to have one person ask half an hour of questions, then someone else do half an hour of questions. It seemed like we could interleave it better than that.
I like it, but since we didn't prepare for that format, let's put that on the back burner. But
very good.
But I like your idea. But since we weren't prepared for that format, I just want everybody to be able to ask their questions and not necessarily forget to ask a question, have to go back, that type of thing.
Very good, no problem.
I wouldn't mind, allowing that opportunity for our October 28th meeting, so that we could more
gather our
for that
thoughts.
Format. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. All right. Who would like to start us off?
So I think one thing that I would like to see more of is we have an approved housing element. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, we do.
And from what I remember, I think was this a specific plan area? We were talking about something in the range of 8,000 housing units.
So the city as a whole has an arena number, which is the regional housing needs allocation, assessment allocation. of 8,772 units citywide.
Okay.
So the specific plan efforts are in an attempt to complete the rezoning necessary to accommodate that amount of development. The housing element identified housing element opportunity sites that were in the Golden State specific plan area and the downtown TOD area. None of the housing element opportunity sites are in the media district, but the media district is really rich in transportation resources and aligns with the general plan's goals of aligning housing and transportation resources. So that's why this effort is also being undertaken.
Yeah, so I think in this particular section of the specific plan, I'd love to see a little bit more incorporation with tying those documents together and explaining. I guess part of it is to ease fears of how these neighborhoods are going to change, but also to talk about how we plan to grow as a city, towards 2035 and beyond, and to meet the needs of some of these state laws that are being passed.
Any further questions? No.
You want to go, Pauline? You want me to go?
Okay.
I'm going to jump around a little bit. I'm going to start on 542 about the zoning designations. I'm just curious why we have specific designations for the media district as opposed to using the zoning out of the general plan.
So the zoning designations are part of the municipal code, Title 10, and those go into more specific details about what is used. So for the media district, it has an MD and then a zoning designation to signify media district. And that goes into sort of the nitty gritty of the fine grained details. So if you look in the permitted use list, it'll be tied to a zone, and then you can see what a whole host of uses that are allowed or prohibited or under what conditions it's allowed. The general plan has a different type of designation called a general plan land use designation, which is much broader.
Yes.
It encompasses just more ideas, which is typical for a general plan.
But most of the city is governed by that. Like, it's good enough for the rest of the city.
So the entire city, every area of the city has a general plan land use designation, and there are several. There's many different ones.
Yes.
And they address different needs that the city has and where they want to accommodate those needs. And the media district does have several different land use designations within its borders. And as part of this effort, we're trying to make that a little more clean and simple so that it addresses mainly media district specific needs and future development opportunities.
Sure. Sorry, let me back up a little bit. One of my concerns about the media district plan in general is that there seem to be a lot of specifics that will tend to make it harder rather than easier to do development in the area, because you have to deal with all of these design guidelines and the special zoning and et cetera, et cetera. So while we say that we want to enable development in this area, it feels like we are then inhibiting the development by raising the cost of development.
Yeah, I see where you're going. So one of the biggest impediments to development right now, particularly in the media district, is that we don't allow a lot of it. So the development potential that we allow is, again, the dwelling units per acre and the floor area ratio. And right now, both of those numbers are too low for developers to even want to bite and propose projects.
Sure.
So one of the efforts of the media district specific plan is to boost up those numbers in the areas where the community, and we found there's most interest for that happening. And then again, the development standards, while they do appear somewhat cumbersome, and we've heard a lot of feedback that they could be refined to be a little easier to understand, as well as implement.
Like, you have to have evergreen bushes on a studio fence. And I'm like, you can't have non-evergreen bushes? Like, did we need to specify that?
Well, we do, because the state has these requirements where we can only enforce those objective development standards that have to get that specific. So it has to be as detailed as you must use a 5-foot setback, and it cannot be, we suggest you do a pedestrian oriented design. So we understand that makes it a little more complicated for developers, but that's the sort of environment that we're working in on these days. And we've found that to be particularly problematic through the city's processing of our SB 35 applications. One of the most notable ones is Pickwick, And we found through that there were not a lot of objective development standards that we could enforce. And because of that, we were left with the developers having free reign, being able to pretty much propose what they like and just beholden to a few standards.
Is that a bad thing?
And that is
that we let them do that?
Well, the community feels that is a bad thing,
Well, okay.
and the council feels that's a bad thing. So we wanted to address those needs by incorporating these objective development standards.
I guess I will not go into a bunch of nitpicky nonsense then, and I'll simply finish by saying that I feel like that the parking requirements are antithetical to your saying that you want to make this a transit-oriented space, right? Like, we already have you said we have several state laws that ameliorate or eliminate parking requirements. We say we want this to be transit, we talk about the BRT, and then we say, oh, but you have to put parking in there as well, so we were kind of just kidding. So, I mean, I understand that there's various opinion on the parking and things like that. My perspective is that you should just eliminate the parking requirements entirely if you want this to be a transit-oriented development section.
That is certainly an option. We have done a lot of outreach with the community, and the council has weighed in a few times on this as well. And the media district is uniquely situated. It's considered under our general plan to be a transit center. So that means there are transit resources in the area, or will be soon.
Depending on how the council rules on things like that, yes.
Yes, we don't have a crystal ball, so we don't
I understand.
But to your question and statement that if we require parking, then that's not really truly transit oriented. The city does require parking. We have found that it is a way for us to address some common concerns that we hear from the public and the council. Through the media district specific plan update, we are trying to right-size that parking requirement so that it is not overly burdensome and is an impediment to development, because we understand it is a significant piece of the cost.
Sure. Well, especially because you have underground parking requirements here, not just
Exactly.
overground, which is even more expensive.
Exactly. So the media district does actually have a rich resource right now of different parking resources. And we looked at ways in the plan to utilize those to better effect. So we are going to help streamline, there's policy in there to help facilitate the sharing of that parking, so that it can be better used.
Yes.
A lot of the parking is left unused.
Sure, yes.
Because we have made it hard for people to share it. So we're working on those efforts, and we're also looking at efforts to help facilitate the reuse of spaces by adjusting the parking requirements. For example, St. Joe's has mentioned to us that they want to expand, and they're hoping for a growth in their business.
We're all getting older.
And then one of the impediments to that, though, is that our parking requirement for medical offices is extremely high, or much higher than it really should be based on actual need. So we're trying to facilitate the easy transition and uses between spaces to allow for that. So we are reducing a lot of the commercial parking requirements to facilitate that sort of growth. And then the city does have, to encourage transit-oriented development and reduce parking, we have policies in our general plan that allow for a density bonus for a transit-oriented development, which is a huge incentive for many developers. It's a 25% bonus. And then, of course, there is the state law, AB 2097, which allows for most new developments to request to invoke that and have no parking requirements applied to their projects. And almost the entirety of the media district is covered by that state law, falls within the boundaries for that. So a savvy developer who wanted to, say, not build parking, but have a shared parking agreement with someone who does have existing parking, like one of the larger office buildings, could still have parking for their residents, but not build more. So those are all options that we're hoping the plan can help facilitate. So
Can I interject
Please.
for 1 second? For AB 2097, although I understand it's state law and it's kind of hard to not approve it, it's still considered with conditions, correct? So it still could be, like, I don't think AB 2097 should just be approved by right.
Yes, so there are always qualifications to using a state law. Some of them relate to the types of uses that are allowed, of which we are studying citywide. And then there are exemptions when there's certain parking studies that are available that show there's a huge deficit of parking and it'll be a significant impact on the neighborhood. We don't have many of those studies. And through the Media District Specific Plan, we tried to look at those issues, and we found that there is a lot of parking in the district, but it's just not utilized or available for public use. So we are trying to address that again through the shared parking agreements and facilitating, making it easier to have that parking be available.
And if I may piggyback off of what Ms. Landry just said, AB 2097 would be an evaluation on a case-by-case basis. It's
Right.
based on a project submittal. And so, as was mentioned, it's site criteria, site eligibility, the type of use that's going in, and whether or not there are further studies that the city could do to overcome that type of a request. So it's not, like you said, a blanket buy right for
Perfect.
everything.
Okay, yeah.
It's really case by case.
And then separately from the specific plan effort, the city is working on drafting our policies to address that citywide, and we'll be kicking off that effort next year.
I'm good.
Any further questions on your end? Commissioner Makatunine, any questions?
Not at this time, but I do think if we can formalize that we would want this, like a question, a portion of next meeting to be for questions, I think that would be.
Well, next meeting will be a study session as well.
Okay.
So it'll
Okay.
basically be this except for chapters 6
Six.
through 8. So yes, we definitely will have questions next time. I have a few questions, some kind of silly technical questions, some that are more broad. So I just have to know, and I'm so sorry, on table 5.2, what's the difference between a thrift store and a secondhand store? I want to know. I'm sorry.
You know, this is a question many people ask over time, and we are, as part of our effort, we are actually refining definitions for some of these uses because they are murky and can be confusing to the public. Usually a thrift store, I would say it's characterized as more of discount items and less expensive items. And then a secondhand store is more of like things that were used previously and then are now up for sale.
And I believe there's legislation that was just signed that starting January 1st, cities can't treat them differently from regular retail uses, so.
Yeah. So we're incorporating all of those things into our revised use list.
But why would you ban thrift stores and allow secondhand stores? I guess I don't understand that logic.
Well, you'd have to ask the policymakers at that time.
Oh, okay. Well, I assume this was your.
Yeah, we were trying to maintain things that were existing if
I
there
see.
was no major outcry about it.
I see. Okay. Sorry, go ahead, Smith.
Great, thank you. And then also too, in terms of different types of retail, I noticed that there were not firearm stores. Is that because there's none technically allowed now with the new gun ordinance?
So one of the things about the specific plan effort is that it kicked off before the city's efforts to address the sale of firearms. So all the future use lists for all the specific plans will revert to the city's overall policy for that.
Got it. And then have some broader questions. And this is just, some of them are just to kind of like hone in on things that are already said. So in terms of streamlined development approval, developers will have the option essentially of doing an either or, so they could do an SB 35 project or a project under these design guidelines, but we're trying to incentivize them to follow our design guidelines. So this wouldn't necessarily supersede SB 35. Is that what I'm understanding?
So the city is subject to SB 35 and will continue to be so as long as we haven't met, I think, 50% of our arena allocation numbers for this cycle, this housing cycle. So that option will be on the table for developers to use. We're hoping that the entirety of the development standards that we've crafted as part of the Media District Specific Plan are going to be feasible enough for them to still get the same type of return on their investment, because the building costs are going to be the same under either one. And there's some nuances to that statement I just made because there's some union requirements and types of labor that you can use for certain projects, but by and large, it'll be generally the same. So we're trying to ensure that people can, or developers could get enough in terms of building height, density, floor area ratio to get a project that is more attractive and can get them to their goal, whatever it is for the project, over SB 35 or AB 2011.
Got it. So,
yeah.
So some of the incentives are using like TDR and FAR to entice developers to use those instead of just doing a blanket SB 35 project. That's what I'm understanding.
And if people would like to deviate from the exceptions, there's several different processes that could be used. However, those are through a discretionary review. So that includes a lot of time, which is usually a huge incentive for developers to avoid that time invested in the discretionary review and just go straight into a plan check. So they could deviate, but it'll cost them in terms of time.
Got it.
So that's, again, another incentive that we're trying to emphasize.
And how many units have we entitled? I know I ask this every other planning commission meeting, but I never remember the answer, and I doubt the public watches every single meeting. So just maybe they do. I don't know. I know Mr. Donahue does, but
do you mean like how many units the city has approved?
Yes.
Well, every year we do an update to the state. I believe since the beginning of our last housing cycle, we've built less than 3,000 units.
Okay.
So that's been since 2014.
So we need a little less than 5,000 or to not be
for this housing cycle, we'd have to build half of 8,772 units.
Okay. So we're still very much
We are
under.
still very much under. Yeah.
Okay. And then in terms of implementation, I know we went over this at the end, but when do you think this will be enacted, go to council and be enacted?
So we are hoping to get a final draft version to the Planning Commission early next year.
Mm-hmm.
And shortly thereafter present it to the City Council, hopefully by March.
Okay.
And then it would be in effect 31 days after they formally adopt it.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I think everybody is very eager just to protect our housing rights as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then, let's see. Sorry, I'm formulating my question. So for property adjacent to single-family neighborhoods, what is allowed and what will be allowed? Just to kind of hone that home.
Right.
To
So
people.
under the current code, we have regulations that restrict the height of development when it's adjacent to single-family neighborhoods. And that's the biggest sort of protection that we have. And I mentioned earlier it was about 2 to 3 stories for height. And then there's like some step back requirements.
Right, and that could go up to 3 to 4 stories?
That's for under the media district specific plan.
Okay, got it.
And then there's also some design standards that are intended to make sure buildings don't loom over the adjacent properties. I'm trying to just broadly characterize it.
No, of course, I'm not going to sit here and say Amanda Landry said, or Miss Landry,
under the proposed plan, we are still incorporating all of those same sort of design standards to ensure that the buildings are not looming over or inappropriately looking into people's backyards. The height does go to, again, 3 to 4 stories, so it's a little bit taller than what is currently allowed. And again, this is in an effort to have regulations that people can actually build under and will want to build under. So it's a trade-off. But we've also included a lot of other design and performance standards to ensure that development that's adjacent to residential doesn't have so many of those negative side effects. So we have things that address like light, odors, noise, all kinds of things related to that, so that protects the adjacent single-family neighborhoods.
Got it. And so TDR would also move some of those buildings to the center and not necessarily adjacent to residential neighborhoods.
Yes, it's an option for people that are on those edges to
sell their
potentially
right.
sell those rights to someone in the middle, and then those properties in the future could not exercise any of that development potential, the ones that sold their rights off. So that would be kind of memorializing whatever's on the site as it is.
Got it. So in a way, it's an incentive for developers on the edge they could sell their property rights, and that's more money.
Yeah,
for
if
them.
someone bought like 2 different properties and one on the edge for the development rights alone, and then they could develop it in the center.
All right, well, that's interesting. And then in terms of the blank space and the beautification of that's typically on the developer, what I'm understanding, or is that on the city in terms of, we went into discussions on blank walls and trees, and how is that typically?
So without an objective development standard, a developer is most likely going to leave a wall blank. They have no incentive to start adding openings or modulation to the wall, which all adds cost to development. So if we incorporate those standards as objective development standards into the plan, we can ensure that those will be introduced into the architectural style of those buildings. So we don't get things that are just like boxes without windows.
Got it. And the developers pay for that, essentially.
Yeah.
All right. And in terms of the opportunity sites for housing, is there a certain calculation that they will have to be affordable housing, or is that still?
Yes, all development will be subject to the city's inclusionary housing requirements, which are currently being updated.
Okay.
So those will be coming before the Planning Commission at some point for consideration.
So that's to be determined.
Yeah, so that's going to be something that's consistent citywide and not really varying between the specific plans.
Got it. And then in terms of this specific plan, I know that we asked this with the parking requirements, so I'm going to go ahead and ask this. What's the impetus for this? Meaning, is this more about business? Is it more about family housing? I know that we're doing specific plans for reasons, but in terms of what's the goal for the Media City specific plan, if you could.
Right. Well, there's a few things.
Yeah.
There's the plan goals itself, which are to have the contextual development, which was formed due to a concern of new development coming in and being really inappropriately sized or designed as compared to their adjacent neighborhoods. And then there's the desire for transit-oriented growth, which is to address some of the impacts related to not having a lot of housing, but having a rich employment base. And so that creates problems where we have people that want to live here because they work here, but they can't because there's no housing or it's not affordable. And then there's the goal of the streamlining development, because through the years, developers have experienced in Burbank some challenges to getting a permit processed in a timely manner. So that is also an impediment. But then the city has overall goals of achieving housing development, because one, we're beholden to our housing element obligations, which is that 8,772 units. So that's like another pressure. But then at its heart, from the basics from people, they want neighborhoods. We've heard, by and large, they want neighborhoods that are comfortable, feel safe to live in, that they can stay in their neighborhood and access the things that they want and they need. So that's really like the desire to build a neighborhood where people can feel safe and enjoy their time with beautiful architecture and all the amenities that they'd like. So we're trying to help facilitate that, because as we've seen thus far over the past 30 years, while the plan had achieved its goal of limiting some development, it unfortunately didn't allow much of anything else, which we have found today is something that is desired. So.
Got it. All right. And I have more questions, but they were actually for next time. So are there any other questions that anyone has on chapters 1 through 5? No?
No, nothing else.
All right. So at this time.
Before we end.
Yes.
If in advance of our next study session with the commission, if you have questions or would like us to focus on something in particular, please do communicate it to Fred, and we'll be sure to address your particular concerns in our presentation.
Yeah, no Perry Mason moments here at Planning Commission. We respect our staff.
Admit it.
No, we don't want to do that. We like staff. All right. So I guess we will entertain a motion to note in file. Do we need a motion? Do we? No? Okay.
Sorry, Vice Chair, if it's, from what I'm understanding, it seems like unanimous to note and file, with the caveat that, and we'll make sure to note it in the agenda for the coming meeting, that if there's additional discussion that goes beyond just the mobility discussion, we'll just note that it would be continuing discussion regarding the MDSP with the focus on mobility, but that way it will be agendized as a discussion item, and you can continue to provide us with the feedback.
Got it. I'm sure that we will all have questions on the mobility because that's kind of like the exciting
And no pressure
part.
to have, it's not a final exam next meeting. So if you still have questions as we're continuing to develop, keep sending them our way. This has been really helpful, both thank you to the public for their feedback, and you all have really helped honed in certain areas where we need to provide clarification.
Is there, and I don't know if this is necessarily feasible, but is there any way, I know that in times past when these things, I know that there were already walking tours. I didn't personally attend a media-specific walking tour. I did the downtown. But is there any way for the Planning Commission to be able to do a walking tour with staff? I know it would have to be agendized, Brown Act, yada, yada, yada.
We'll put it to you this way. I think for this current effort, we would suggest just continuing down the line of this effort. However, going forward and in between now and a final version, if it's so the desire of the commission, we could look at the feasibility of having, we'd have to follow the Brown Act requirements, notice it, and you may have other members of the public following along. But by all means, we could have something like that. We've done that in the past for individual projects. This is just a larger project. And so you all would just have to kind of gear up for a walking tour of the media district, because the last time we did it, it took us like 2 different events to capture the entire media district area. But yeah, it's well within your purview to ask.
As long as it's not 110 degrees out.
And maybe not raining, yeah.
I think on top of that, it'd be really nice to gear it towards like areas where the city has identified the most potential for like sites that are most suitable for this type of development. Just to provide a little bit more context for what we can expect to see in the future.
Yeah, we can plan for that.
I'm sure it's been done, but just a little bit.
Of course, yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
Great. All right, we're note and filed. Chair Rosati, would you like to come back, or are you? Is your wife telling you need to come home now? We'll write you a note.
All right, that was fun. Now is the time for oral communications from the public. Any person may speak during this period of time to address the planning board for a maximum time of 3 minutes. For members of the public that wish to speak in person, please deliver a card to the staff. If you'd like to call in, the number is 818-238-3335. Just remember to lower your speaker and reduce your TV when delivering your message. Do we have any cards?
We have no speakers or callers.
No speakers or callers. Okay. I'm just going to give it a minute. Okay, there are no speakers or callers. I declare the public comment period closed. Does the board have any questions for the city attorney or staff? Seeing, yes?
I actually have a
No?
question.
Yes? No? Okay.
I
Seeing
actually have
none?
one question.
Oh,
I know, I'm sorry. Well, we're already here late. I may as well just.
go ahead.
This is just a general question about, whoa, that sounded very loud. This is just a general question about specific plans. I know that we have. It's a general question. Yes. Sorry. I know that we have this one, we have the Rancho coming up, we have the downtown specific, I know we have one more. Are there? Golden State, thank you. Will we have more that essentially ever encompasses will every specific area of the city have a specific plan? I know that's a loaded question, I'm just curious.
Yeah, it really is the will of the electeds to see how much of the city they would like to have very tailored regulations. The most recent one being that council did fund the effort in the Rancho, but under the general plan, our marching orders under that 2013 effort were to look at the media district, look at creating a new specific plan in the Golden State District, which is the one you're talking about, and then the collective kind of the merging of the San Fernando master plan and the Burbank Center plan. So it is possible that as things occur over time or there's areas of interest, let's just say Magnolia Park is one of those areas where it's like so unique that the members of the community are like, we really should have our own set of regulations that are tailored to the local needs in that area. It's quite possible that could occur, but I would say as far as capacity for staff right now, we probably hit our upper limit when it comes to the 4 specific plans. You're effectively undertaking a general plan update by the amount of effort that you're going to be being a part of in the next 8 months, and then let alone the next 10 to 12 months after that with the Rancho. But it's quite possible that that could occur. You know, the specific plan, the general plan right now has a planning period till 2035. The nuanced part of it is we've been talking about a housing element that takes us through October of 2029. There's still one more housing element anticipated planning cycle that would take us beyond 2035. So these efforts, not only are we looking at 8,700 units, we may be looking at more. The city council has set a goal of trying to build 12,000 units by 2035. So there are a lot of extenuating circumstances that will come into play and factor into whether we focus on that effort or continue maybe and create other plans for very geographic areas. So it's possible that we could have further ones. City of LA has 30 plus community plans that are supposed to encompass eventually the entire city. That would be great. That would keep the planners and the city attorney in business. But as far as capacity right now with the staffing levels, I think we're at what we call our bandwidth. We've hit top bandwidth. Once the specific plans are done, though, we could start a expanded work plan. I just want to close with this by saying that this level of effort, really appreciate you all honing in on this. And in the next couple of months, similar level of effort for the other specific plans, probably even more intensive because there's a lot more at play with the opportunity sites there. So really, really want to commend you for your effort tonight and just kind of continue that feedback. And so that the public can also witness that you're taking this effort very seriously and really going into the details. So, and this is an ongoing conversation we're having with you in dialogue. Same thing with the public and all these efforts. But you'll be very busy start of January 2025. I'm trying to be mindful of your time just because these are so big, these efforts, and we want to bring them to you in a manageable capacity. So there may be like a month or two of one plan, and then as that gets transitioned and you make a recommendation, we'll move to another plan and so forth. But we'll be giving you information along the way for all 3 specific plans that are currently in play.
We're up for it. Now's the time for approval of the minutes for July and August. Have we had a chance to review that? And if we have, can we get the appropriate motion?
I think, Chair, we asked if we could take 2 separate motions, one for each set of minutes.
Yeah. Item G.
Is there something else?
So in my script, it says city attorney will provide a presentation of the.
No, that's not there. Yeah.
So I got a weird script. Okay. Disregard me.
So to your point, the approval of the minutes is the next action item, and then
Yeah, so you would take those separately?
Yeah.
All right,
if
so
you
why
can.
don't, can I get a motion for the July minutes, please? Going once?
I move to approve the minutes from July
We
22nd,
have a motion.
2024.
Sure, I will second.
We have a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any,
Aye.
aye. Any, no abstentions? Motion passes. And then can I get a motion for the August minutes?
Sure, I will move to approve the August minutes.
We have a first.
Second.
We have a tie for second. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Seeing none, no one abstains. Now is the time for introduction of additional agenda items. Planning board members may introduce new items for discussion, but no action may take place except to place it on a future agenda. Does anyone have anything they'd like to introduce? Seeing none. Now is the time for city planner comments. Are there any comments from our planner?
Yes, Chair. Now is the time, we've come back to you to request a selection of a liaison to the Arts and Public Places Committee. It used to be Commissioner Monaco, and I think for a while you were also a representative, so we're back. Parks and Recreation has asked that we request a liaison from the commission, and just for the sake of the group, this would be to assist with reviewing and approving art proposals that come to the committee as a whole. And so that's the item before
Can
you.
you tell us the time and day they meet so we can understand our schedules?
That is a really good question. We'll have to take a look.
I know it is.
Take a look here.
Can I just say something while he's looking that up? And this is for art and public places, correct? Is
Yeah,
that?
that is correct.
I would actually like to be considered, however, I'm the current liaison to the Sustainability Commission that sometimes does have meetings during our meetings, so,
Why don't
you
you
know.
just trade with Safarian?
I was just about to say, would anybody like to trade and be, or I don't know if Mr. Bennett wants to do that because it's his old commission, or I'm just throwing that out there, but if anybody wants, or if you wanted, you guys can fight it out.
I don't mind.
I think I'll pass for now because I'm just not really sure what it entails, and I want to make sure I'm giving all my effort here since I'm new. But
All right, so I'll take
thanks.
the sustainable then.
Sustainable, okay.
So, Chair, it's the next one is November 4th, so it's the first Monday of the month, and they meet at 6 o'clock.
Okay, good. All right.
And do they meet in room 104? I can figure that out, I guess.
Believe so. That's in CSB in the Community Services Building downstairs. If it's not 104, it's 101. So it's one of those two.
Okay, I'll go knock on a bunch of doors and see what answers.
We'll get to the exact
Well, thanks for
location.
Thanks for working that out. Sometimes you have to give an arm or two, but that's good.
Thank you.
We now, any other comments, sir?
No, that's it.
We now adjourn the planning board meeting for Monday, October 28, 2024, at 6 p.m. This meeting will be held in person in the City Council Chambers at 275 East Olive Avenue. The public is invited to attend the meeting in person, or you can view it online. The public will be able to provide public comment in the following three ways: in person, during the appropriate meeting time, or by leaving an e-comment at www.burbankca.gov/e-comments, or by calling 818-238-3335. Thank you for your participation. Good evening.